Alrighty, so now in week 11, the first thing I want us to do is to fix what is naturally frustrating, but also anytime we're tracking information, it needs to be able to be persistent. Okay. And there are many ways today to make data persistent. We're going to approach it probably the most simple, straightforward way. And not really the way you do it in the real world, but it gives you enough of an experience of making data persist. And when I mean persist, and I've talked about it, but as we enter data, right, as we enter data into our app, right, it goes away because it's not being persistent, because it's not being stored anywhere, right? So if you've studied computers, you've heard volatile versus non-volatile parts of the computer, right? So RAM is volatile. So what happens here is this data only exists in RAM. So what we wanted to do is make it persist, okay, by storing it somewhere. And in this case, we have options even in this area, right? So only if we wanted to store it in the browser and not out on the larger web. We have amazing choices actually. I asked my new friend, and I say that just laughing out loud, but it kind of feels that way sometimes. I'm asking a lot of questions, getting some interesting data. But I said, for persistent data on the client side JavaScript CRUD code, is there an alternative to local storage? And it's like, yeah, there are. There are several out there. Okay. So I'm like, okay, I'll play around with some of these. These actually, the one I think I'll play around with later. And maybe this is something, if we have time, we can convert what we're going to do, because it's the same API, so advanced program interface, both local storage and session storage. Now, it's okay, we haven't defined what these terms are. I'm just telling you. I did do a little research, but I decided for this round, again, we're trying to approach this as how can I do this in kind of the most straightforward way possible. So I landed on local storage as our solution for now. Okay. So local storage is a read-only property. Okay, this is key, read-only. Right? And a window interface accessing a storage object. Okay. And what this means is we can set values on it. Okay. Um, and you'll see that as we move closer into it. Right. It's similar to session storage, except that there's no expiration. So if you've heard of session cookies or session storage, those are great, but they expire after a while. So we want something that doesn't really expire. Okay. So there are some concerns because obviously we'd never want to do this for an actual app, because then the data that the user enters is only on our local systems. That wouldn't make sense. It makes sense ultimately as you move forward in your development to actually do this out on the web somewhere. Okay. Um, and this is key too. Like this, it's only in string value. This is key. We're going to actually learn a new term besides local storage, if you don't already know it. It's called JSON today. So here's some examples of how we do it. So let's actually jump in and do it. So I have the mileage program up. I have DevTools open. And now I'm just going to type local storage down on the console and see that there's nothing in there right now. Okay, so the storage, nothing. It is setting there ready for me to use it. And I could use it using these methods like set item, get item, remove item, clear item. So these are not very many methods related to this. So let's use the basic one first. So let's say local storage, and this is a method dot set item. Now when we set the item, we need to give it a key. So let's say I'm going to you can give it your name. Now in this case, you hit comma to give it the value. Okay. So now this is the command that saves it into local storage. Okay. Now, how can I get it back? I can do local storage again. And now this time when I run it, it shows me what's in there. I can even reference it because notice what kind of data structure it is. It is a object. So I could do dot name and it would give me the name. Okay. Now, just to show you it's persistent, but I'm going to show you this in another way in a minute. If I just refresh the page and come back to local storage, just to look at it, I see that the name I stored is still in there. Okay, so key value pair. It's not exactly like our traditional object literals here. It's a little different. It gives me the length as another key value here. So what if we tried to do, let's just do another one. Let's do local storage. In this case, do age, comma, right? 58. Right? Oh, helps when you do local storage dot set name Rio, showing your age there, 59. Okay, that works as well. So now if I roll back up and I say, hey, show me local storage again. Oh, okay. So now I have a length of 2, so I have 2 key value pairs inside of here. Well, that's cool, right? So if I just keep setting item, okay, that's what it looks like. But I want to show you another way to see this. As you go over to application, is it an application? Yeah, application. It might be by default listed in here, and then you click on, because this is your live server. So notice here what these are, right? So these are actually the values in a graphical way versus on the command line, just another way to see them. And you could easily use that other method called clear, but you can also just clear them here. So I'm going to go ahead and clear them all here, roll back through that and see that they're gone. And it's kind of fun to see them reappear when you set them again. I'm just going to roll back up. I'm hitting the up arrow. And when I do that, I see them here, right? So again, you can look at them in different ways. Now, this is not going to be pertinent to, well, it is pertinent to the way we write code, but I'm just showing you kind of some interface ways to see what's in local storage because it'll become an issue later. And notice if I run it twice, it doesn't duplicate it, right? Because it needs a unique key. And so it just writes over it. And that's an important thing. Okay, so far so good. Let's go ahead and clear this. Now let's think about our data, right? Think about our data. So if I go into my data, right, I know that we are storing an array of objects. Let's just store an array first to see what that's like. So local storage set item, and let's say array, set it is equal to 1, 2, 3, right? Cool. So now we can see it. It's 1, 2, oh, it went back. There it is. I accidentally got off of here. And you can see the value down here as well. So when we ask to say, hey, show me local storage, interesting, because that array in here is a string. So it's not like I could do local storage dot array and then I could say, hey, show me the first entry. It does show me the first entry, but let's say actually 0 is right, 0 index. So if it's 1, it's the comma because this now gets converted to a string. And that's what this was saying, right? When it's string format. Okay. So we know that is going to, our data is an array of objects. So now let's kind of take this one step further and say, let's clear this up, bring this up a little bit. Okay. It's going to error out because I deleted it. So now what if we do local storage dot set item, right? And we could actually at this point, since we still have it here, we could say set item trip data. going to be equal to, or what's the value is going to be my data. Hmm, interesting, right? Oh, wow, object, object. So it does recognize that there's an array and that there's objects in there, but I can't reference. Like if I was just to want to say, hey, show me, do I have it? So yeah, show me, right? Just like I was trying to reference the array, and well, I can't do local storage, right? Well, that's going to give me the trip data. But if I was to try to say within the trip data, right, it won't let me peer in there, right? If I say, well, actually, that is probably, it does show me that. So I obviously can't do miles, right? It's not defined. And that's because it is JSON formatted. That's where I was heading with this, okay? Because when you take an object, right, local storage, let's just say array of objects, data type. Nope, should be data type. Okay. It gives us a couple. What is a data type? Right. There it is. Is an array of objects JSON. A JSON contains 0, 1, or more ordered items separated by a comma. The JSON array is surrounded by the brackets. So here's the point, is that when you store an array of objects, it is trying to convert it into JSON, or it's actually referencing it as JSON. So what we have to specifically do is use some methods to change it into, from our array of, and it always confused me a little bit when people would talk about JSON, because it's JSON stands for, if you don't know, if you've never heard it, that's okay. But what is JSON? It's actually JavaScript object notation. But you would think if it's JavaScript object notation, we could read it without having to do anything to it. But it's not true. We actually have to convert it into object literals or arrays with object literals in order for us to use it. Okay? Okay, so this first video, let's just see how far we're in, because I know I spent a little time here. Yeah, so let's actually stop here. We didn't do any coding, right? In your notes, right? Do a little research on your own about JSON, right? And look at the JSON format, right? So this is just a graphic for what this looks like, right? Do some research and come to a newer understanding of JSON, right? The importance of JSON is pretty phenomenal. Actually, this introduction is it's okay, but there are definitely better ones out there. Wikipedia has one. Of course, you could look at MDN. I think MDN gives probably the best reference, right? Douglas Crocker, who created, I believe, JavaScript. No, he wrote JavaScript, the good parts is who he is. Um, Ike created JavaScript, right? Exists as a string. So do some research and come to a better, a more complete. And here's some examples. Now these are objects, and within the objects, then you have, in this case, so you can, when you're dealing with JSON, you can have multiple data structures, right, that are in there. All right, so do that in your README file. Write a little something about what you're understanding at this point, and here's what I want you to know: we're going to have to convert our array of objects, okay, into JSON in order for us to store them correctly into local storage. And then we have to, when we pull them back out, because the other one I didn't talk about is actually get item. Okay, so when we get the item out, if we were to do trip data, okay, right, when it comes out, it returns a variable or it returns data. Notice when it says undefined here, it's just there's nothing. And when it says anything here, that's just what happens as a result. It's a returned value. It's object to object. So we have to both convert something on the way in before we save it, and we have to convert it on the way out. So let's do that next in the next one. Okay.